At every national meeting, we try to provide a global perspective, and we always try to find the best person on the planet to provide that global perspective. To introduce that person, who's our special guest this morning, and we're privileged to have, is a member of our board and the managing director of Cisco, Cliff Thomas.
Thanks, Lee. So about 4.5 years ago, I first met Anil Menon in Mumbai, India, as he likes to remind me, Bombay. And it was over the last 4.5 years, I've had a unique opportunity to work closely with Anil. And what I think you're going to see in the next 50 minutes is his passion and excitement for the future opportunities of our cities. And as the president of Cisco's Smart Connected Community Practice and our deputy globalization officer, he's going to bring some global insights for American cities. So straight from Bangalore, India, through Paris, to Minneapolis, to here, Grand Rapids, Dr. Anil Menon.
Thanks, Cliff. Good morning. So you're the ones who didn't drink, huh? When you fly, I travel about 3 to 4 countries a month. And so someone asked me yesterday, how come you're not jet lagged? I said, the secret is don't get off the plane. So here I am. I just flew in from Bangalore for this session because I wanted to speak to American cities for a change. So I'm flying back tomorrow morning, back to Delhi. So I'm going to fly 48 hours to be on the ground for 16 hours to be with you, because I do believe this is probably one of the more exciting times that we have. We have our second headquarters. Cisco's second headquarters is in Bangalore. We chose Bangalore over Singapore, Shanghai, and Dubai. And we chose Bangalore for a particular reason. And I'm going to speak to that a little bit. But I do want to talk about the cities, because this, we have this little thing going on in Washington now. And no one noticed. But I travel around the world, and last week I was in Portugal and in Jakarta. So this is my travel schedule. I was in Jakarta, from Jakarta to Portugal to Lisbon, and from Lisbon to Cascais, and met with the planning commissioners and city mayors and the others. I do want to say 2 things, and I do have my points to mention here, but I do want to start with this. And I am biased. So this is like that book that says, The Unbiased Look at the Civil War, the Southern Perspective. So this is an unbiased look after going to all these countries. And over the last 1 year, I've gone to about 36 or 38 countries. And here's where I conclude. I hear and I read in the newspapers about issues in America, about cities and issues in Congress. I continue to believe that if you consider the problems in Jakarta, if you consider the problems in Germany, even though Angela Merkel has come back, if you consider the problems in UK, you consider the problems in India or in China, I still think the bet for the future is here in America and the cities. And in fact, I get beat up on a regular basis. Beat up is not the word. When I go to Germany, I get beat up in the UK, and I get beat up in, obviously in China, I just stand there and say, go ahead. Because they always want to know, is Cisco involved in this NSA thing? Because we are the network company, remember? And then they beat up on America. And I always say, I hear what you're saying. There have been some issues, I agree. Now let me ask you this. You want America to be a better company? Tell me, which country do you want America to be like? Name me the country you want America to be like. You want it to be more like Germany? No. You want it to be more like France? No. You want it to be more like China? No. So which country do you want America to be like? And the fact of the matter is, everybody wants to be more like America. They won't admit to that. Everybody wants to be more like a city here. Maybe not Paris, maybe not London. There are a few cities that are great cities, global cities. But the fact of the matter that comes back, so I always come back to this question that, having said all of these things, if you want to ask me what is the one thing that I worry about the most, as an immigrant, I came here 32 years ago. As a teenager, I always say I came here as a teenager, although I turned 20 the day after I got into America. But I still say, it sounds better to say I came here as a teenager. So I came here as a teenager, and I'll tell you this, the one thing that worries me the most about America is if you talk to those young kids that we just heard about, is your standard of living going to be better than your parents? They will not say yes. This is the big issue. You go and you talk to any other youth anywhere in the world and you say, is your standard of life going to be better than your parents? 99% will say yes. Even when they don't have education, even when they don't have clean water, even when they don't have clean electricity, and the electricity is dirty electricity, they will still have that optimism that Doug DeVos was talking about over here. To me, that is the soul of a city that we have to catch back. And I think we're missing that a little bit. So if there's one thing that I worry about, maybe I'm much more sensitive to that, that's the one thing that I focus on. Now, my daughters are going to say, yes, they're going to have a better life than me. I'm absolutely one. But that is a small percentage. It should be the bulk of America that should feel that way. In the last 5 years, if you look at the wealth created in America, in the last 5 years, 95% of all wealth created in America in the last 5 years went to less than 1% of the country. This is not sustainable the way America is and America was. So it is not a political statement. All I say is this is an important issue for us to consider as city leaders, as civic leaders, and as business leaders. So with that, those thematic points will come back. And the other point that I want to make here is that when you go into a Jakarta, or when you go into a Mumbai, or when you go into a Sao Paulo, or when you go into a Qatar, Doha, the fact of the matter is this. There is no emerging countries without being connected to an America, to a Japan, to a UK, or to a France. There is no emerging country. So the solutions are the cities here, but I will also argue with you the solutions are Seoul, the solution is Jakarta, the solution is a Delhi, is a Mumbai, and these other cities. Because I'll tell you, this is just one simple example. 3% of Korea's GDP, 3% of Korea's GDP is spent on tutoring the children. Not K-12, it's the extra hour tutoring, 3%. The highest paid teacher in Korea is an English teacher who makes $3 million a year. I have to believe there is an English teacher sitting here in Michigan or sitting in Idaho who can use high quality video, very high quality digital network, and train a kid sitting in Bombay or a kid sitting in Shanghai or a kid sitting in Korea and make easy $250,000 to $300,000. Easy today. Because I see this on a daily basis. In Songdo, which is one of the cities that we're helping build in Korea, we asked of all the things that you would like to get as a digital service in a city, do you know what was the number one? It was not golf. It was not surprising for me. This blew me away when the number 3 that came from the cities was advising on nail polish for women. Don't ask me. I didn't even try to understand it. But apparently this is a big deal because now Korea, Seoul, and Korea has beaten Brazil for plastic surgeries. So, new information, right? But you know what was the number one? On all of these, they said we'll be willing to pay $20, $16 a month. We were trying to estimate how much is their willingness to pay. The number one was $243. Do you know what that was for? Was that? No? Library services, to tell my kids what books to read. And if they like physics, what books ought they know about? To me, I believe professors, high school teachers sitting in America offering that as a service on a 5 to 10 hours a week is a completely untapped business opportunity that exists. So the point that I'm going to make here is, I heard all this discussion about American cities. The answer is the American city, but the answer is the American city is the answer to the problems of the emerging markets, and you need to figure out how we connect the dots there. Because there's a lot of money out there, a lot of money. And that is one of the surprising things that you find when you go abroad and you travel these countries, the amount of money sitting and waiting to be spent. And they look to America. And the other thing that I'll just finish on this point again on America is, you'll be surprised, after they beat me up and I engage, the one thing they keep saying is, why is America not leading? There is a vacuum of political and business leadership globally. And this is not a political statement. And they keep saying, We want America to tell us how to build Jakarta. This is the vice governor of Jakarta telling me. I went to Istanbul, and you keep reading about all this stuff because Turkey is becoming more Islamic, and that means there's going to... But they said, we want to work closely with, and by the way, they are, before they make any decision, whether it's a Kurd problem or the Armenian problem. So this is a message that I wanted to bring here, along with my next message, which, surprise, surprise, is going to be about digital. I am an immigrant, but I'll tell you the next generation of immigrant is going to be a digital immigrant. Somebody who's not going to leave their country, but will consider themselves to be a resident of Grand Rapids, Michigan, or a person living in Grand Rapids, Michigan who says, I'm a resident of Bangalore or a resident of Shanghai. Because today, if you want to be an immigrant, you physically have to relocate. You don't need to do that anymore. And I would argue that the citizenship notion is going to be a little different as we go forward. So with that, let me just give you some tyranny of numbers, which is about taking place. So I overlook 20 countries, essentially, along with my smart connected business. So that's the BRICM, which is, as you all know, is BRIC plus Mexico. The next 5 that we have identified at Cisco is Turkey, Indonesia, Poland, South Africa, and Saudi Arabia. And then the next 10 has got Ukraine, Chile, Argentina, Colombia, Malaysia, Vietnam, and UAE and Qatar. So I have to travel to these places. It sounds exciting, but Marriott looks the same everywhere. So let me just say why Cisco is standing in front of cities. And I suspect half of you probably don't even know Cisco. In fact, my father still thinks I got fired at IBM because he said, why would you go for a company that no one has heard of? As much as I can tell him about routers and switches, he still says, yes, yes, but IBM, you don't need to explain to me. So the only thing I can tell you all is Cisco was $400 million 18 years ago. We have $48 billion in revenue today. We have $53 billion in cash. We have 75% of the market share, which means 75% of the world's traffic on the internet goes through a Cisco router. So where do you grow from there? You go to where the numbers are, which is the emerging markets. So this is what I do. My focus is about where's the next Cisco going to be? Where's the next big opportunity? So with that, I want to say, we are looking at how do you shape the markets, not get the market when it's formed. Today is the time to shape the markets as they're building and emerging in India, as they're building and emerging in Qatar. I'll just take Qatar as an example. 200,000 people, the world's richest on a per capita basis, 80,000. They're going to spend $110 billion in the next 9 years for World Cup. They're going to build airports. They're building 6 universities. They're building 6 cities around knowledge, around fashion, around design. And I would argue they're looking for someone to say, what do we do here? Because we got the money. So these are the places that we need to shape, not to respond to later. And by the way, if you go into Brazil is a little different challenge today, but if you go into Indonesia, 5 years from now, they'll say, why were you not here when we were struggling and trying to figure out what we want to do? I don't need you now. I needed you 5 years back. Now is the time to engage at a city level. At a city level. In Bangalore, next month, the mayor of San Francisco is going to come back. Every 2 years, the mayor of San Francisco will bring his entire team to say, how do we build better partnership? How do we build better ecosystems? Amsterdam came saying, we're aging, we're shrinking. Can we get more Indians to move to Amsterdam to create more businesses? I had 3 people just move to Singapore. As you know, Singapore is shrinking, 30% shrinkage in population in Singapore. So they were standing in a line for immigration to get some paperwork. And a guy comes up in a suit and says, Mr. Luthra, can you please step aside? We want to talk to you. And he said, oh, crap, I'm going to be thrown out of the country now. And they said, Mr. Luthra, we didn't want you to stand in line. Please come to this room. We want to help you. Tell us what you need. What are the other things? Have you found a house? Do you need help with the house? By the way, why don't you move to Singapore? Your profile is exactly the kind of person, so your kids will go to this school. They're doing a sales job on all 3 of my guys, and they will all move to Singapore. Because they need 4 million people to meet the GDP requirements. So they're targeting. So with that, where are the trends that are shaping the world? The biggest social shift in history, aging. The world is aging. By 2050, which is just round the corner as far as the city life is concerned, 16% of the world is going to be over 65, and 21% of the US is going to be over the age of 65. Now, I think of myself, there was a time when I was saying 65, man, that's old. Now I'm like, 65, that's just right here, and the hell I'm going to retire. I'm working for the next 40 years. I have a 3-year-old, which means I have to work for 40 years. But the fact is, 65 is an industrial economy concept. 65 is not today's world when we're younger, we're stronger, we are better, with better health. We should be developing more, but then try, like last week I was in Portugal, the biggest discussion was, can we cut down 35 hours a week to even less? And I started my speech and said, I just came from a country where they're trying to figure to work 36 hours a day. When you figure out your week, there's somebody over here who's figured out how to do it in one day. By the way, they're not taking the next 6 days off. That's your competition, Bangladesh. And we better figure that out too. By the way, I'm not suggesting change your quality of life. I am suggesting there's a different way to frame the question so that we can take a 5 days work, but make a different contribution. There is a way that you can retire from your job at 65, but do something to help the urban planners of Jakarta, the urban planners of Mumbai, and the urban planners of all these new cities, whether it's Ethiopia, Angola. Angola is a huge market right now because they got money. Help them develop a better city. Because if you don't develop a better city, they move into Europe. When they move into Europe, and 30%, Rotterdam is now an Islamic country or city, but the problem is not that it's an Islamic city. The problem is that they segregated city, and that is a dangerous problem for Netherlands. We are not globally aware. We are global people. If you talk to the CEOs, they'll tell you which countries they're in. They can tell you which countries they have got market share, but they can't tell you why they're in that country and what that country is all about. They're not globally aware. We need our kids to become more globally aware. Shrinking. Look at Germany, 14% down, but Russia is going to be 20% down. Japan is going to be 20% down in shrinking. And combine the shrinking of Japan of 20% shrinkage to 37% over 65. You see the problem of Japan. And that continues to all these countries. And then you look at all the other countries, whether it's Indonesia, whether it's India. Over the next 15 years, Indonesia is going to go up from 40 million people of working age to 170 million of working age. This is a huge shift. You better have them trained for jobs, trained with healthcare, or they are going to be a serious problem on that country and that neighborhood. Same as in India. 600 million children in India who are living in cities, going to schools that have one teacher. And that one teacher has a 40% absenteeism. There's nothing more dangerous than a 16 or an 18 or a 19-year-old Indian who does not have access to clean health, clean water, health, and jobs. That demographic dividend, Brazil has already missed it. And this is a problem of Brazil because they are now talking about putting a new internet, but they have the worst GDP structure of infrastructure. It's 16%. India is 51% of the GDP is stock of infrastructure, and the average for a developed country is 71%. You have to build roads before you start thinking of the next internet. So the practical realities are going to kick in very quickly, and this is where we can step in. In America, by 2050, we are going to double the number of 65 years, double to 90 million by 2050. I just saw numbers today on pension funds of the top 50 cities of America. And even the ones that look solvent, go back and look at the estimates, assumptions they put in on the pension funds investment performance. It's 8.5 to 9%. Show me the last time you saw 8.5 and 9% returns on investment returns. So even the ones that are showing solvent do not show you the assumption on the pension fund returns. This is a ticking time bomb that we have to worry about. Now, having said all of this, take a look at the top 10 economies. In 1820, India and China were the top two. America was 1.8% of the world's GDP. By 1999, America is number one at 30%. By 2010, America has dropped from 30% of the world's GDP to 24%. But by 2050, India and China will have over 50% of the world's GDP. And by the way, look at the top 10. Many of the European countries have dropped off the list. It's Indonesia, Brazil, Russia, and Mexico. Are we in these countries today engaging, or we are not going to be global companies going forward? By the way, when you look at this number, that is the absolute number, but then you go back to the GDP numbers, and what you find is none of those countries in the top 10 richest countries. It's still Norway, it is still Singapore, it is still US, it is still Japan, which means the rich individuals are in these countries, but the wealth amount is not in these countries. So what do you want to be? Serving the few or serving the mass and making money? By the way, you can't sell healthcare in India, in Malaysia, the way we sell healthcare here because they can't afford it. So you got to think differently of your business model. So future growth is going to be on business models, not on technology. So this is what it is. 1950, there was only one city with 10 million or more. By 2015, that's 2 years from now, there'll be 23 cities with over 10 million. Just for the urbanization that is taking place worldwide, which is 800 million people moving from villages into cities, 800 million people, that is the equivalent of creating one London every month till 2025. And that is what is going on right now. Chongqing, I just came back from Chongqing a couple of weeks ago. Those of you who are following the Chinese trials of Bo Xilai, that was his place. We started with Bo Xilai. I worked with Bo Xilai, and that's why I can tell you stories about Bo Xilai, which will fill New York Times. But here's interesting, 32 million people, of which only 6 million are what you would call city standards. They have to get it to 32 million. So how do we do that? But here's the interesting thing. Whether I'm talking to the vice governor of Jakarta or whether I'm talking to the mayors in America, whether it's the mayor in Miami or the mayor in Boston, Mayor Menon talks exactly the same way as the vice governor of Jakarta, except the scale is different. Because the problems are the same. Which means, let us think through how we create a city that solves not only the city problem, but can help solve the global problem and create an entire new set of revenue streams for the city. So congestion. You know, we just talked about congestion. The average Parisian spends 4 years of their life looking for a parking space. If you look at Chicago, you look at New York, you look at Los Angeles, between the times of 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock, 40 to 60% of all traffic congestion is searching for a parking space. Now, the question we should be asking is not should you drive 1 mile less, we should be asking why is there congestion? If it's for parking space, can we use location-based services so you know exactly where there are parking spaces that are open and how much are you willing to pay for it? Closer to the restaurant, pay more. And you know what? Many of us will do that. If you have more time, you'll park a little farther away. We are working with Streetline, a company, to do exactly that in New York, and we're testing it and piloting it out. This is an entirely new stream of revenues for cities because most city spaces for parking, 30 to 40% of them are empty because people don't know where it is, and the rest people have used and they are overstayed and they're not paying the parking. Just finding that is the key. And we're working with Streetline in California and elsewhere. So here's where people ask me, how come you can keep going at 3 to 4 hours of sleep, which is the average that I do? Because I said, I have no time. You know, you go and sit down at these places and you talk to them, you're going to sit there saying, man, I got about 40 more years to get this solved. And there is nothing more exciting than these problems because the answers are also within that people. So we got to figure something out. But cities traditionally have siloed everything. The traffic people have their own solutions. The waste people have their own solutions. The traffic management have their own. The police have their own. And this silo is why cities today can't solve the problem. It's not that they don't have the funds. It's fragmented. And there is no integration and no thought as to why we should be integrating and why does open data matter. I'm going to come back to the 5 things that I look for when I engage with cities because there are so many of these cities that we can only work with because we are a very small team because we are the future of Cisco. So I'm going to ask you this one question. What if you had unlimited computing at a reasonable price? What if you had unlimited storage at a reasonable price? What if you had bandwidth that was unlimited at a reasonable price? And what if everything is connected to everything? Would you run healthcare the same way? Would you run education the same way? Would you run the city the same way? Would you run your own life the same way? And by the way, what if all of this connection is not data, but voice and video? Where I can see you, high quality, just the way you're sitting in front of me. Would you then engage differently? Would you then do things differently? And so in that context, I would say that what I see across the globe is that cities focus on physical infrastructure, roads, highways, buildings, water. The amount of focus on digital infrastructure is minimal to almost non-existent. They may talk about SPs, they might talk about connectivity, but not about how the digital infrastructure is going to transform the life of that city and the soul of that city. I have come to one conclusion: a great city, the great cities are the ones that have a soul. You heard that. It doesn't mean it's a big city. You better have a soul of that city or the city will die. You can have beautiful buildings, and I can show you beautiful buildings in many, many places, but the soul was lost along the way. So what if, in just 18 years from 1992 to 2010, one MEP of computing has gone down from $222 to 13 cents, and today it is less than 5 cents. Storage has come down from $569 to 5 cents in 2010, and today it is free. So much so that if you get one of those little things, pen drives, and it says 4 gigabytes, how many of you think, oh shit, I don't need that? You want 32 gigs. You want 64 gigs, and now you want a terabyte on a pen drive. By the way, this presentation of mine in 1959 would have cost you $30 million to put it on a storage disk. True. And it would have filled this entire section because those things were huge. So we do have affordable digital infrastructure except for bandwidth. That is the next big thing. It is coming very soon. And everything is connected to everything. So here are the facts on that too. We have now got more digital devices than individuals in the world. I'll just give a very simple number. How many toothbrushes are sold in the world? Can you guess? I'll give you the answer because we're running out of time and you're looking, oh geez, I'm still a little hungover, so I'm not going to answer your question. 2.6 billion, plus or minus. 2.6 billion toothbrushes in the world. Do you know how many cell phones are sold in the world? 6 billion. So there are people sitting in some places brushing their teeth with a stick or powdered ash with a cell phone. I want you now to imagine those as consumers in a democracy where they have access to information about corruption. This is why Brazil has erupted. This is why Istanbul has erupted. This is why India has erupted. This is why the Arab Spring has erupted, because you have access to the information you didn't have before and you are aware of your own existence at that given point. So 50 billion things that are going to be connected. And what are the things connected? Your cars to your lights, and I want to give you some examples of it, and then I'll stop. By the way, the most important point I want to bring up is video is the new killer app. Email was the last killer app. Video is the next killer app. And what that means is by 2018, 91% of all internet traffic is going to be video-based. Just to give you a point of reference, in 2012, 20 average American families loaded onto the internet more data than the entire internet of 2008. By 2020, one family will load onto the internet more data than the entire internet of 2008. I sit in India. I watch Suits, Big Bang Theory, 6 hours after it is shown. Not with a fake, I'm paying for it on Apple, on Hulu. By the way, Hulu doesn't allow me to use it because they don't have copyright elsewhere, so all I do is I VPN it in and they don't even know I'm not in America. My kid taught me how to do it. Is this being taped? So, I have a very serious point to make here, which I'll show you in a minute. It is the one thing that I don't care how cynical you are in this world, you watch that, you are saying there is hope for humanity. I want to show you that just in 1 minute. In fact, I'll say it now. In India, I work with an organization called Agastya. They train 1 million children in rural areas that have no lights, no electricity, and math and science, STEM, Nancy. 1 million children a year is a target. Intel science competition of last year in India, 12 out of the 50 came from those villages. Kids 3 years ago could not have played on the computer if their life depended on it. Why would we not leverage them to create applications for our businesses here as we age? And it is not taking advantage of the poor. For them, it's 0 or 30, and they would love to create apps for education, for healthcare, because they understand those problems. So, and they're going to be mobile. So I'm just going to jump forward, because this is what I'm saying, is the Internet of Everything is here. It is not about connecting things, it's about connecting people, processes, data. So we talk about open data, but we never ask the question, for what? Why are you focused on open data? Why do you care about open data? It is to create a better city and a more livable city, and a one where you have social sustainability, environmental sustainability, and economic sustainability, all three of them, not 1 out of 3 or 2 out of 3. Connecting the unconnected. 99% of the world is unconnected. Huge opportunities. I saw this art prize as I was walking about. Art saves lives. Why is this not connected to children in Korea, children in Brazil, children in UAE, children in the elsewhere? You connect them, let them come into a digital 3D dimension, fusion that we have created. We're going to have a different kind of environment as we go up. We'll have globally aware children, globally aware citizens. We've only just begun. So how do we do this? What do we need to do? How many minutes do I have? Okay. We look at technology as a service, not technology as products. How do I offer healthcare at $1 a month? How do I offer healthcare as $1 a day? My headquarters, the group that we have in India, has now created a box where we are delivering healthcare in the villages at $1 a day. I'll give you one other unbelievable statistic. The country of Tanzania, 45 million people. The country of Tanzania has one of the highest birth rates. The country of Tanzania at 45 million people does not have one pediatric surgeon, does not have one pediatric pulmonologist, does not have one pediatric radiologist. It's a crime that there is a country where there are children being born that don't have access to a radiologist. The first radiologist is going to be trained in UK and come back to Tanzania, and within 6 months he will leave and go back to UK. I have no doubt in my mind about it. Do you know who is doing the radiologist? Reading all the x-rays, reading the pulmonology reports, is being done in Bangalore. So what we did was we put the Cisco network into Tanzania, connected them back to these doctors and the radiologists in Bangalore, and we said, we need you to look at those radiologist reports and give them advice online using our networks. We're doing that in Nepal, we're doing that in Afghanistan, and the fact is, all doctors want to help, but they don't want to go into villages. All teachers want to help, but they don't want to go and live in villages. You don't need to move. You just need to care and use the technology. And you need to have a business model. So, in order for this to happen globally, we say your platform, the network, so if there's some message, it is that your network should be secure. It should be resilient. It should be scalable. And it should be cloud-based. That's the only way you can afford it. And this is technology, so I won't go into that in more detail. Happy to provide more details on our white papers. But this is what I want. Everyone should always say, how is video going to transform city management? And start with that and work your way back. And this is where we believe cities are emerging, by the way. There's a small city called Rivas in Spain. Very small city. We work with them. They could not afford to have basketball courts because of, all the sizes. Just put an automatic up and down based on computers, sensors. So when little kids go, the basketball courts go down. And the size of the court changes because of lights. When the big kids come, it goes back up. They need only one, and they can maximize utilization. They've cut OpEx of the city budget and offering more services. So here are some of the things that I want to bring up. In order to do that at a city level, we better have a city infrastructure management platform that is a digital layer on top of your physical layer. And they should be seamlessly integrated. But today what I find is people will say, I'm building this beautiful building. It is no different than if you were to say, I'm going to build this building, and I'll worry about water later. I'll worry about electricity later. Anyone do that? But you're doing that with ICT. You RFP it out. It is not designed in. The architects are more important than your technology infrastructure. You will pay for the architect to come in with the design, but you don't have anybody sitting and thinking, how will that entire digital infrastructure change the way we work, we play, and we do live? It has to be seamlessly integrated in for water, smart traffic, smart parking. So that city infrastructure management platform, and we believe this is where the city Wi-Fi comes in. City Wi-Fi is different than the SP Wi-Fi. This is about how do you offer services. So without getting into the details, this is the layer that is missing in most of the cities. We have now started with Copenhagen. We're doing it in Barcelona. We're doing it in Seoul. We're doing it in multiple cities where we're saying, how do you take the Wi-Fi network to offer urban services so that you can transform the way governments and cities engage with their citizens? Example is Hamburg. This is a project we're working. The point that I want to make here is logistics is a huge issue everywhere, but logistics is an information problem, and we can solve it differently. But the answer I want to give here is the reason I put it up is a public authority, a SP, a service provider, some software players. No one city, no one company can do it. It is a public-private partnership, and we have not cracked the code on public-private partnership. It is still generally the model. Government is avoiding expense, and businesses are avoiding risk. We need to have a true public-private partnership model. Open data. These are the ways that you can use open data differently. Chicago crime. Chicago can actually get to the point where they know exactly where the crime is done. I just saw a number here today that talked about in one of the large cities, 70% of people serving time in the prison come from 8 neighborhoods. 70% from 8 neighborhoods. You know it. And analytics. By the way, there was a time when Person of Interest, the show, used to be science fiction, not anymore. So this open data is a global thing. This is the other point I want to make. Think about open data as a global phenomenon, not as a city phenomenon, not as a Grand Rapids, not as a Chicago, not as a New York. It's a global thing. If those of you want to go, just look at jumpingsheep.org. It's the most fascinating online on open data that I have seen anywhere. And here in America, but it's a collaborative effort. So, smart traffic. So I'm just gonna jump forward because I think the point has been made that we can do. We just did something in Nice where we took Victor Hugo Boulevard, connected the waste, connected the parking, connected the lights, connected noise and pollution all on one network, so you can have a completely different experience in Nice to create new jobs. By the way, all of open data should create new economic development. Today we haven't conceived that idea. I just want to finish with this. This is a new building. In a typical building such as this, when you are building, 70% of all energy is consumed in cities, 40 to 50% of all, maybe even more in some cities, of all energy in a city is used in commercial buildings like this, and 30% of this building is wasting energy, even if it's LEED certified. Because there are 74 to 84 protocols that goes from the light to the network to the elevators to the HVAC that don't talk to each other. In Bangalore, on my campus, my office is gone. I'm gone 20 days a month. But lights are on, computer is on, my laptop is on or the phone is on. So today what happens is if Cliff or someone comes and swipes outside my office, the phone system, everything changes to that person. They can use my office while I'm gone. All the posters will have their baby's picture, their family pictures, except for their coffee cup. They got everything else in their room, and they can move across the different place. Here's the interesting thing. I've gone from 1,000 people in Bangalore to 12,000 in 5 years. We had a roadmap for 15,000. We need 2 less buildings. That is the CapEx savings for me and for Cisco of $130 million. Now scale that out into a city level. So put them all on one network, and then you manage it. So I'm moving forward. So I just want to bring this up. This is where I want to talk. Hershey, Pennsylvania. They get the cocoa from Ghana. So Cisco, Hershey, we worked, and we said, let's connect the schools in Ghana to the school in Hershey. The teacher who's teaching the kids of the Hershey children in Hershey, Pennsylvania, are also simultaneously teaching the kids through high quality definition in Ghana. They work on projects together, and they will work together for the next 10 to 12 years. I want you to tell me there's a child growing up in Hershey who's going to think of an African child as a foreign thing. This, by the way, all that the kids do is, we told them you can stay working on the farms. Because the families say, I can't take them out to go to school. They said, no, work on the farms. Because of the time difference, when you're finished with the farm, you go into the school and you start with your class, and the kids love it. This is an experiment. It should be scaled. Smart grids. These are all the cities in the project. So I want to say, what is the common themes? And if you ask me, what do you want to take away from, what do I want to tell you? What I've come to the conclusion, what our team has come to the conclusion is, in order for the city to be a great city, to be a future city, to be a smart, connected community, there are 5 things that are needed. Not 3 out of the 5, all 5 is needed for it to become so. Before I do that, I want to say, so I asked this question, is this a new dawn or a false beginning? I'm an Edison cylinder phonograph collector. Not the disc, but the one earlier than that. I have one of the largest collections. So I go back to my buddy, Thomas Edison. If Tom Edison was born again, not in the Christian sense, but born again, reincarnated. If he was born again, reincarnated, and came to my house, by the way, now that I live in India, I can say reincarnated, so yeah, that makes sense. If he was born again and he came to my home in Florida, if I showed him the Holy Grail, which is the Idalia, he would say, oh, that I have touched, because there are very few of us. I have those. He can play with my machines, and he said, that teeth mark is mine. Because he was deaf. He had to bite on the thing to listen to the music. That's how you tell whether Edison touched that phonograph, is the bite mark. So he'll say, I get it. And I said, now let me show you what Ambika listens to. He will never, ever make the connection from his Idalia and the phonograph to this iPod. Never in a million years. He wouldn't get it. Then I said, now let's go over to the Florida Utility and Power Company. This is the patent he applied in 1892. That is now GE. And this is the grid in our time. Anyone see a difference? This is the reason why we have an energy shortage here. It has not been this public-private competition, consumerism, flow of ideas that created it. Today, in electricity grid in America, you know how much we're spending on R&D for electricity and electric grid? 0.3%. Do you know how much we're spending on pet foods? 6.4% is R&D for pet foods. It puts in perspective the challenges that we have and the focus that we have put. Why it's not competition. So these are the 5 things that we say. The visionary leadership. What do you want the city to be? We keep talking about the city having to create jobs. Jobs for what? Jobs of what kind? What is the soul of the city that will sustain that innovation on a sustainable manner? Why and what? Are you trying to become a global city? Are you trying to become a local city? There's nothing wrong in being a local city that is focused on domestic market, but you better be globally aware, because the competition is going to come into those cities from outside. So I ask this question all the time of people. when they're senior executives. I ask this of myself. If you were starting out today, let me ask you all, if you were starting out today, would you be in this job that you're in? Would you be in this company that you're with? And if the answer is no, or you're hesitating, then the next question I ask is, then what are you doing to change the answer? So the same question I ask of all of us, if you were starting out today, would you live in the city that you're in? Not because your friends are there, not because your wife or children or your husband don't want to move, not because of a business. Will you want to come back to that same city again? That is the first question we should be asking mayors, deputy mayors. If this is a city you are starting from scratch today, would it look, feel, and be as it is today? If not, what are we doing to change it? Second is global open standards. Are we thinking globally? Not protectionism, but global, open up. And I always say, you know, this I'm going to give you tax rebate to come in is the most lazy approach to city management worldwide. Because a city or a state giving tax benefits is the equivalent of a company saying, I'm going to give you a discount for the product to buy it. There is nothing more slippery than becoming a commodity and undifferentiated. Because everybody does it. Everybody, trust me, every country I go to, they want to say, I'll give you tax benefits. I'm like, yeah, but you still have no talent. You still don't have the ecosystem. We went to Bangalore with crappy infrastructure. Why? Because there's an innovation ecosystem that we could exploit. California, Silicon Valley is terrible for taxes, yet people are not moving out of there and moving to some of the other states. Why? Because you can make more money. The revenues are greater. The ecosystem is such. You can only do it there, so you're willing to put up with the taxes because you're saying, I'm going to become more successful by being there. So the question we have to ask is, what are you going to do about that? Global app and smart regulation. I'm going to give you one example. You see those exit signs? They drive me crazy. Why do you need those exit signs when you have smartphones, smart machines that can tell you, don't leave this floor? But that, you will not get a building permit unless you put that thing in. By the way, you can do 80% of recycling of water, but you won't get permits if you don't have in-ground retention tanks. So you store water that you don't need, and you flush it into the sewage system that you don't want to waste. Why? Because you won't get your permits otherwise. I'm going to give one more example to say how silly these regulations have gotten. Cities today are not developed for the digital world. I went to a big city, won't name the city. Some of you know because I told you. I was invited by the mayor of the city. Someone heard, the mayor said, can you please come and meet with me because I want to transform our city. It's one of the largest cities in America. Went to his office. His chief of staff comes on and says, Mr. Menon, thank you for coming. And then he asked my rep, have you all signed that paperwork, some paper form? So we said, no. She said, come down with me. Took us down to the next level and gave me a paper. Said, will you please sign this to meet the mayor? So what is this? To register yourself as a lobbyist. I said, excuse me? Says, no, because of this mayor who was just kicked out, we had in a recall, there's a new law passed that says if you are meeting with a mayor, you are essentially a lobbyist and you should disclose yourself. It's $500 per person who's going to sign that form. A, I don't want to be a lobbyist called a lobbyist. We have lobbyists. B, I was looking at it and says, now this is interesting because the next thing he said is, by the way, you have to come for a 3-hour ethics course within the next 30 days or it's a criminal offense. So I said, okay, thank you so much. I said, I appreciate the invitation, but I'm getting back on the plane to fly out of here because I flew into Miami just for this meeting. As I'm going down, the deputy mayor is running down the stairs saying, Mr. Menon, please don't leave. Please come by here. The general counsel and the mayor are talking, and we don't know how to deal with this. This is all new to us. So I stood there, and then they figured out that the law says you cannot meet the mayor in his office. So he says, can you please stand here? Because the mayor will walk by and just happen to meet you. So I'm standing there, the mayor walks by and says, oh, this is Anil Menon from Cisco. He said, oh, thank you so much. Let's go into this office. It's not the mayor's office, so he could meet with me. That is what the lawyers came up with. Now, that's the kind of stupidity that has to stop. Because you can't keep businesses away from these problems because business and government and academia is the answer and the public-private partnership is the next one. And the last one is the new ecosystem. Do we have innovations? Do we have new companies thinking about the way you're going to offer healthcare, education, traffic, using open data, creating a new system? And I'm going to end by just saying this. I saw the art prize. It was exciting for me. But is it episodic is the first question in my head. Is it episodic once a year? Do all those people who are coming here see so much of it saying, I'm going to move back here to Grand Rapids because I can do more over here as an artist, as a gallery owner than anything else? Is the entire ecosystem oriented around art? Was the first thought that maybe, but that was my first thought. Because that is how you create a sustainable, deep innovation that no one else can copy. No one else can copy, whether it is healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's art. So I'm going to finish by saying thank you so much for having me, and I enjoyed this. I'll just say this. The first innovation in the world might have been fire. The second, I argue, is a stone wheel. Over the last 2,000 years, the stone wheel has evolved and become steel, radial, and everything. People traveled from humanity started. They had baggage. They had carpet bags. They had big trunks. They put it on ships. It's only in the last 20 years that somebody said, let's put wheels on luggage. Have you ever wondered why? Two great industries evolved over time, but they never thought about putting wheels on luggage. They carried it. They struggled with it. Today, would you buy a briefcase without wheels? People are not buying shoes without wheels. Only thing happens, innovation happens when you bring multiple disciplines, different disciplines together, and then challenge them to solve a problem. So I hope that's what will happen here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry I went over my time.
Stay up here, Chris. At next year's national meeting, we will have a 2-day conference, and we will have one speaker, Anil Menon. First of all, I've never seen anybody speak nonstop and also carry a bottle of water. Phenomenal athletic skills. And I also want you to know, Anil, that...
26, that's why.
That's right. And I want you to know that I've been wondering all morning, where are these people in the empty chairs? And I came to a revelation that tied into your speech. There are literally 50 people behind that wall watching you on screens.
I saw that.
Who think that you look better on the screen than in person.
Do I have more hair on the screen?
But all I can tell you is that my point is that even in this room, digital technology is what people are choosing to use, and it is phenomenal. Your message has got our heads spinning. And if we could have planned this differently, we would have planned another hour to ask you questions. So I'm going to publicly put you on the spot and say, you must speak at our next conference. We will, we will put aside 2 hours for you to actually speak, drink water, and answer questions. But I have to...
You know, they say I suffer from stage fright. I'm afraid to get off the stage, so I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I can tell that. I can tell that, yeah. So all I can say to you is I apologize to you, and I apologize to all of you that we can't allow questions because we are 25 minutes behind schedule, but there was no way I was going to stop you. No way.
Thank you.
Because that was phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Between Bruce Katz and Tony Hsieh and you, our heads are spinning.